Hey, Divine Ones, it's Jerome Braggs, and I want to come to you for episode 2 of my new series, The Well-Being, which is where I share some of the experiences and stories and wisdom that I had and that I've gained through my near-death experience and the rite of passage that followed that. So if you're new to me a little bit, um, my journey really started in 2004 when a team of doctors diagnosed me with two terminal illnesses and gave me 7 days to live. And using everything that I knew about creation and the law of attraction at the time, I completely and miraculously healed myself in 3 months' time and was being called a miracle child. But I found myself back in that same hospital a year and a half later with the exact same diagnosis. And instead of 7 days to live, this time I had 48 hours. And on my deathbed, this time I had what many people call a near-death experience, where I saw the light, crossed over to the other side, and had a conversation with my soul, where I was told a host of things, but one mainly being what the key was to really healing our not just our bodies but our lives and creating true well-being for ourselves. And that was to come back home to our souls. That near-death experience for me started a multi-year, what I call a rite of passage. It was a very mystical healing journey where I learned a lot about creation and manifestation, who we really are as souls. I learned a lot about self-love and healing. I learned a lot about what it really takes to be well and really live well here as a soul on the planet. My intuitive gifts opened, a lot of mystical things happened for me. And I'd like to share more of what that journey entailed, what I learned through that journey, and what those experiences was. So this is what this particular series is about. Today I want to talk about a concept that you probably heard a lot if you're in any type of metaphysical or spiritual field, or if you've read any books, and that's that you create your reality 100%. And what I learned through my near-death experiences and the journey that followed is that's absolutely 100% true, but it's not true how you think it is, and how it's mostly been taught to us and how the conversation of it has been going. Um, what I mean by you create your reality 100% is that everything that is showing up as your life, and everything that is showing up in your life is a creation of yours somehow. But where we get stuck on that particular word is a lot of us take creation as it meaning something that we wanted, something that we intended, something that was our preference, and something that we asked for. And that's where what my journey taught me is where a lot of the conversation is kind of missing. There's a missing link to this because that's not actually true. While a lot of things that show up in our lives are things we dreamed about, are things that we intended, are things that we put on our vision boards, are things that we are our preferences and the things that we are asking the universe for. The most of our lives that show up as our lives isn't that actual thing. It doesn't come as a result of that. And there's also like in conversations like the movie The Secret and a lot of the law of attraction books and conversations, there's this big thing around your thoughts create your life, right? And thought is definitely an aspect of what begins to show up for your life there, but there's a missing piece to that as well. And it's not the whole piece. And it's one of the reasons why so many people who have watched like the movie The Secret or taking the law of attraction, seminars and workshops and reading the books aren't really manifesting more delicious lives, more whole lives, more healthy lives for themselves on a consistent basis. Like they're able to manifest some things, but not on a consistent basis. And it seems like their life, yeah, they manifested the lover, but it didn't work out well, or they got some money, but not the level of money that they really wanted, or their life is still not chaos free or struggle free or feels delicious to them. And what I learned in my journey is there's a missing piece to this, and I kind of want to talk about this today because it's not just how you're thinking and what you're thinking. that is creating your life. And although, yes, you are, as a soul, you are a facet of God. You are literally the incarnation of Source, in a physical human body with all the powers of Source. You are not limited in any way of what you can create. There is nothing outside of you creating in your life, in either of our lives, no matter who you are or where you are. And again, that level of 100% responsibility can be very triggering for us in the beginning, especially when we first hear it. I know it was for me. It took me many years to understand this. And I'm only sharing things that not only, I'm not sharing anything in this series that I read in the book that somebody told me. I'm sharing something that I had a very deep experience with, a very mystical experience, and that I've been able to prove time and time and time again in my life, and help other people prove to their in their lives time and time and time and time again. So this isn't about theory. This isn't about philosophy. This is about lived experience and continual lived experience. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. So one aspect of how we create, meaning what shows up in our life, what gets manifested in our life, and what gets manifested as our life. One aspect of that is, what you prefer, what you're asking for, what you're dreaming about, what you're visualizing continually. It's what you continually to think about, and what I mean continually, it's not just what you thought about today, or it's a habitual thought, like it's a pattern, it's a thought pattern, right? So that does contribute to a little bit to what shows up, but it's actually the smaller part to how your reality is created for you. One of the main rules is that nothing is happening to you, it's happening through you. And this is really, you've heard me talk. If you've heard me, if you're not, brand new to me, you've heard me talk a lot about as within, so without. But I want to let you know what that actually means. Like, what's the within? So whatever is within you must be manifested in your external world. Without, in the without, it must be materialized. It must be experienced. It must be lived. Whatever you're holding internally must be lived externally. I want to share with you what that actually means, because this is really the key, more than just what you're thinking about or what's on that vision board or all of that. What is really creating a reality outside of just kind of what you're asking for and what you're dreaming about or what you're preferring. And this is, again, many people get caught in why they get triggered around that they create their reality 100%, because they're living some things that are kind of painful. They're living some things that are kind of scary. They're living some things that are not what they want. They're not what they prefer. They're not what they're asking for. They're not what they're dreaming. And they're saying, I would never create that for myself. Like, I would not create that for myself. And that's partially true. You would not, none of us would create any type of struggle or pain or oppression or bondage consciously for ourselves, like intentionally for ourselves. So it's not that you intended that, but there's another aspect of our being that creates our reality that not a lot of people are talking about and not a lot of people are aware of. And it's the key that when you finally understand that and you do work around that, it will shift everything. It will shift your health. It will shift your wealth. It will shift your relationships. It will shift your entire being, your entire way of living when you start to understand that. And what that is there's a part of us that the preferences and intentions that we set, right, creates our reality. And then the larger part that actually creates our reality is your internal state, right? And I'm going to talk about what your internal state is, because this is very important. So it's like what's being held inside. So as within, so without. So what do I mean by your internal state? Your internal state is created by the truths that you hold, what you hold as truth for you. And that's based upon what you believe. What you believe is the truth for you. Like what you believe about the truth you're holding about yourself, like what you think is true for you, and the truth that you're holding about how the world works around you and towards you. Right? That, those types of truths, and those, I'm going to talk about how a little bit in a second, how those are created, like where we get those from. But the truths that you hold. And so this is important because the universe that we are in, this particular universal dimension that we are in as souls having a human experience, its main responsibility in the manifestation of your life is to make sure your inner truths become external reality. Its main responsibility. So whatever you believe is true for you must be affirmed, supported, and lived in your external life, in your reality. So if I believe, for instance, that I have to work really hard to get money, then no matter what I do, no matter who gives me, millionaire secrets or whatever, if that is the truth that I am holding, the universe can't buck my truth. That's another thing. The universe cannot buck our truths. It cannot do something different. It can't make us wrong. The universe has to only unconditionally love us. And this is one thing I learned in my near-death experience. The universe unconditionally loves us, and that's all it can do. And one part of unconditionally loving us is if we say something is true for us, it must be true in our lives. It must make it. The universe has no other choice but to make that true in our lives. So where do we get our personal truths, right? So again, personal truth is what you believe is true about you and what you believe is true for you in the world. So where do we get those truths? Most of our truths that we hold, some of them are through our lived experiences, and some things we experienced and we say, oh, this has to be true because I've experienced it. I lived it, right? But the majority of the truths that we get are socialized into us. They're socialized into us, meaning there's something we got from our families. There's something our families believed, our families understood, our families taught us. It's how they believed about the world. It's what they taught us about who we are. Also the cultures that we grew up in. So for example, I'm an African American, so Black culture. I grew up in Black culture. There are truths that Black culture holds about how the world responds to us, what we can expect from the world, and who we are as a being inside of the world. And you hear that. It's in the messaging that you hear. Some of it is directly told to you. Some of it is indirectly told to you. Some of it you see played out over and over and over in your environment. But a lot of the personal truths that we hold aren't truths that we developed ourselves. They have been socialized into us. And again, whatever truth you hold internally has to be a lived experience in your reality. The second aspect outside of so socialization is mainly how most of our truths have been placed in. The great thing about it is that you can change any of those truths. You can change any of those personal truths that you hold. You can change them. That you don't have to stay within the truths that you were given in your childhood. And again, a lot of this was given in childhood. So it's what you saw your parents, doing, what you heard your parents say about how life works. This life is hard. It's not going to cut you any breaks. A lot of people's parents told them that. So that becomes the inner truth that you hold. Nice guys finish last. That becomes the inner truth that you hold, and it becomes a lived experience. So if you're a nice guy, you're out there having experience where you just can never seem to get a break and never can seem to have the type of relationship that you want, right? That's, again, the universe has to give you the lived reality that matches your inner truths. It has to do that. So the inner truths are what we're holding as truth. Again, what you're holding is truth about who you are, and what you're holding as truth about how the world works and how it responds to you. The other part that very few people talk about, that is a huge factor in how your reality is created, is your traumas, particularly how you feel about yourself, and what I call a traumatized vibration. Now, if you've seen the video I've done before, I've talked a lot about what trauma is actually to the soul and how it's a little different than our Western definition of trauma. And, we define trauma as mostly there's some tragic or horrific event that happens to us and it changes us some way, right? It may be some type of abuse, like violent abuse or rape or something like that. It could be a loss of a limb. It could be a loss of a loved one. It could be a dramatic and horrific accident. It could be an illness or a disease that happens. But we define that particular incident as the trauma. and that it gets, that particular thing gets stuck in the body. But that's not actually how the soul sees trauma. So trauma, the root word of trauma is a Greek word, and the Greek word that is the root word for trauma actually means wound. It means wound. And this is the thing literally that is an injury to our being, and it gets infected. And if it goes unhealed, it continues to infect all of our lives, and it makes our lives sicker, literally, like sicker in our lives and sicker in our bodies. But what trauma is to the soul, so what the wound is from our soul's perspective, the higher self part of us, the God part of us. What trauma is from our soul's perspective is it's not necessarily the event that happened, right? So it's not necessarily that you were abused or that you lost someone or you got an accident, or you got a disease or something like that. What it is how that event made you feel about yourself. And usually the trauma part of it is it disconnected you from the truth of yourself in some way. And how it usually does that, what the real trauma usually is it makes you think something is wrong with you somehow, right? So either something is wrong with your intellect, something is wrong with your body, something is wrong with you're not enough somehow. And you're not good. You're not whole and good anymore, like you knew when you came in as a soul. It disconnects you from that knowing, so that you now feel like something is wrong with you. So you internally feel like something is wrong with you. And then the other part of that is it makes you feel like you're not safe in the world somehow. You're not safe. So either the world becomes dangerous, maybe, and it differs for whatever that particular event was. The underlying belief is that you're not safe, but it differs from whatever that event was. So if someone is raped, they begin to believe that their trauma is they begin that their body's not safe. They're not safe with men. Men are not safe. And so that may be something. If that you have a disease, then you think your body's not safe. It's not a safe place to be. It's not a safe place to live inside of. And all of that. And I'm going to do another video in here because there's a whole nother aspect that happens to that, because when we become traumatized, and I'd say 99.9999% of human beings on the planet get traumatized in some way. We get especially in our childhood, something happens to us that makes us believe that something is wrong with us somehow and that the world is not safe. But I'm going to do another video on this series to talk about what happens when that trauma gets into the body, because what actually happens is the pieces of our soul disconnect from our bodies, and they don't come back inside of our bodies until we heal that trauma. But I'm going to talk about that in another video in depth. But why this is important to understand is when we have trauma and it goes unhealed, right? So again, the trauma is you are disconnected from the truth of yourself, that you're whole, that nothing is wrong with you, that you are enough, and that you are worthy, and that you're safe in the world. And this particular world is a safe place to be. Every single human that is born, and every soul that comes into humanity and comes into a human incarnation comes in initially with the understanding that it is a good thing. It is a holy and a good thing, and this world is a good place to be. And we hold that internally, right? In our internal state of being, we hold it emotionally and vibrationally. When I say vibration, that's really what I'm talking about. How you feel emotionally, that's the energy of your body and the energy of your being. We hold that until we get traumatized, until something happens to us externally that makes us afraid of who we are and being inside of this world. Why that's important is because your trauma is actually one of the hugest pieces that creates your life. It's one of the hugest pieces from which your life is created from. Because when you understand everything is created through you, not to you. It's created through you. So if you believe, remember, we talked about personal truths, right? So if you believe this world is not safe, that becomes a truth for you. And if you believe there's something wrong with you, that becomes a truth for you. And so you begin to create a life experience over and over and over again that affirms and supports and continues to kind of that cycle going that continues to prove back to you and affirm back to you that something is wrong with you, that you're not enough somehow, and that you're not safe in the world. And no matter what type of vision board you do, no matter what type of manifestation exercise you take, until you heal that trauma, everything going to come back to that. So you can want the great, you can ask the universe and you can try to do all the vision boards to manifest that partner or that lover that you want. And that partner is going to come. But your life experience has to always be reflective of what's going on in your external world has to be a reflection of what's going on in your internal world, because the external world is only a creation and a manifestation of the internal world. So that partner will come. But if you have unhealed trauma around not feeling enough somehow, they're going to make you feel more not enough. If you feel unsafe, that relationship is going to make you feel more unsafe. The same thing with trying to manifest, a job or a new life. You can do that, right? So again, the things you focus on and your intentions, they are part of the manifesting, but the bigger energy that is behind what shows up as your life is how you feel about yourself, right? And what you're holding as true for yourself. And so if something is in how you feel about yourself and it says you're not worthy, or you're not enough, or something's wrong with you, or you're not really safe in the world, your body's not safe in the world, your life experience is always going to come back to an experience of that. And that's why it behooves us greatly to get a deep understanding of what that trauma is that we're holding. There's trauma also that happens. We're talking about socialization and trauma that happens. There's trauma that happens around race. As a black man, as a child, there was a lot of traumatization that I got around that. I was definitely taught a truth was for me as a black male that I'm not safe in the world, and that the world is out to get me, and that especially the police and especially white people. And I lived that experience. I manifested that experience for myself for many years until I did the healing work to look at what the trauma was in me. And again, the trauma is not your fault. This is why when I said initially in the beginning that fault and shame is taken out of what's created, because it's very unkind and unloving to expect ourselves to know how to do something that nobody taught us how to do. And a lot of us are creating more out of the fear and the trauma than out of our desires and our intentions. And it's not our fault. Nobody taught us about that our traumas are creating. Nobody taught us that our inner truths, right? Our belief systems about ourselves and the world around us is what's creating more than what we're preferring and more than what, we're putting out there. And so this particular thing is vitally important to start to understand, and why so many people who watch The Secret and who do law of attraction things don't necessarily create on a higher scale and a more consistent scale lives of well-being, like fulfilling, delicious lives that taste and feel good to them, because we're not taught about this internal piece, which is, you'll hear a lot of people call it the vibration. I call it vibration, frequency, or internal state of being. So you'll hear me use those three words to kind of mean the same thing. And that's really what your world is being created through. It's being created through your vibration, and your vibration is created by the truths that you're holding, and the unhealed trauma that you hold within you, and basically how you think and how you feel about yourself, basically. And those things, the truths and the traumas influence that. They influence, and they instruct that. They instruct how you feel and what you think about yourself, right? So if you have been traumatized and it's unhealed, you're going to feel like something's wrong with you. My traumas, I've talked a lot about that, and I will be talking more about what my traumas were in this particular video series. But, I definitely had a feeling that something was wrong with my body, that it wasn't enough because it wasn't thin, that I was unattractive and I was unlovable and undesirable. And so I began to create experiences that always affirmed that. My relationships always led back to that. No matter what relationship I got in, eventually it started to make me feel like something was wrong with my body, right? The person I would be dating would make little comments here and there about, how I would be really attractive if I lost, this weight, or, it would be all of this type of stuff, right? No matter who they were, no matter where I found them, no matter how awesome of a person they were, my life experience always came back to mirror my vibration, which was I wasn't enough. Also, I believed that, there was something wrong with me because I was a same gender loving person. I was attracted to the same gender. And I had a lot of manifestations around that. And again, these are not things that you're intending to manifest. This is not something you're asking for intentionally. These are not things that you're asking for to show up or you're asking the universe for. This is just how we work as souls on this planet. Your internal world must be reflected in the external world. And it must be reflected to the degree that you feel it internally. It must be. And it will continue to get bigger until you heal it or you shift it. But when you shift it and when you heal it, your whole world changes. This was a large part of my own healing, was understanding that even the diseases and illnesses that were coming up in my body, they were a reflection, and I'll be doing another video about that, but they were a reflection of how I was feeling about myself and the trauma that I was carrying that I had not healed. And when I began to heal the trauma, and I began to change how I felt about myself and how I thought about myself and what I was holding as the truth, that was the core root key to my healing and the transformation of my life. And I can promise you, if you do that work, if you reconnect, if you heal the trauma and reconnect to the truth of yourself, which is you're whole, you're worthy, you're enough, there's nothing wrong with you, and that you're safe in this world. If you can do the healing work, and there's many modalities, right? There's so many different paths to get you to that place. It doesn't matter. It's whatever path works for you. But if you can do the healing work to reconnect you to the truth of yourself, you begin to manifest a different life experience, because that life, now you have a different truth. So now your reality must mirror back. It must be based on that truth. That's the key. It's not about that vision board. It's not about, and while those things can help, right? But that's not what it's about. It's not about that affirmation. It's about changing how you what the truths you hold internally and how you feel about yourself internally. You change those two things and you heal whatever inside of you that's having you feel less than and feel scared and feel afraid of life. You heal that, your entire life will change. Your entire life is created by you, but it's not just created by the preferences that you have or what you're asking for. It's created by what you've been socialized to hold as a truth for yourself and what you've been traumatized into believing about yourself, especially the things you're believing around something being wrong with you and you not being safe. So I hope this kind of illuminates that a little bit. I knew this video was going to be a little longer than what I initially wanted to do, but I hope this illuminates this for a little bit. For some reason, I'm still not able to see you all's comments on this video, so I can't answer any of your questions live, but I will be coming, I'll try to come every day. Some things may happen, so I may not do this every day, but I have a lot I want to share that I learned through my near-death experience and through the rite of passage that followed that. Basically about how to be well and how to live well as a soul having a human experience. Heal your trauma and you will stop the drama in your life. I promise you that. Much love. Bye.